Genius black janitor left a mysterious note. What the CEO discovered nearly crashed a $200 million deal. The first light of dawn had barely schemed the Manhattan skyline when Sienna Calvert stood rooted behind the polished surface of her mahogany desk on the 42nd floor of Calvert Equities. Her eyes were locked on a yellow envelope resting by her keyboard. No stamp, no return address, no markings at all. But it wasn't the envelope itself that sent a chill through her, it was what lay inside. She pulled out a printed copy of the upcoming merger contract identical to the one she'd spent weeks preparing to unveil at the weekend press conference. Only this one was scarred with 3 crimson slashes, and next to clause 7.3, a handwritten note in bold, steady letters, "This clause is a trap. If you sign it, Calvert won't belong to you anymore." Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the paper, which felt strangely damp, as though printed only hours earlier. But how no one else had clearance to handle this document? No one but. She slammed a button on her intercom. "Seth, I want a full security audit. Check the cameras on this floor, starting at 11 p.m. last night. I want a list of everyone who entered this office." "Yes, ma'am," came the brisk reply. 10 minutes later, Seth, head of security, returned with 2 compliance officers and a tablet balanced on one arm. Sienna leaned in as they queued up the security footage. The video showed a man in janitor's overalls moving quietly through her office, emptying waste baskets, wiping down desks. But then he paused, glancing at the framed photograph on her bookshelf before placing the envelope on her desk with almost ceremonial care. "Name?" Sienna demanded. "Evan Marlowe," Seth responded. "Night shift janitor since March. Keeps a low profile. Nothing suspicious on record. Bring him up here. Now." A few moments later, Evan Marlowe walked in tall and broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a guarded composure. His eyes were alert and measured, the kind of eyes that had seen the worst life had to offer but refused to surrender to it. Sienna didn't waste breath on small talk. "How did you get this contract?" she demanded. "Who gave you access?" Evan held her gaze calmly. "No one gave me access. I didn't need permission to see a trap." She felt the room go cold. "That wasn't my question," she shot back. "How did you get your hands on this?" He shrugged slightly. "Ever check the second floor copier? People sometimes forget to collect their test prints. They think mistakes don't matter, but you'd be surprised what they leave behind. I saw it, I read it, and recognized the pattern." Sienna's voice hardened. "And why should I believe a janitor's pattern recognition?" A faint, tired smile crossed Evan's face. "I used to be a senior auditor at Whitaker & Cross. In 2017, I flagged a $370 million error before it exploded. No one listened. I lost my career trying to save theirs." Her mind caught on that name like a fishhook. Whitaker & Cross. She remembered the anonymous forensic report that had shaken Wall Street back then, a ruthless analysis that had become industry legend. No one had ever owned it publicly. She studied the man before her, weighing possibility against risk. "Do you have evidence?" she asked finally. "Not everything," Evan admitted, "but enough to know that signing this clause shifts voting rights into an offshore trust. You'll lose authority over Calvert." "Who?" she demanded. He didn't flinch. "Only someone with the reach and access to hide a clause in plain sight." Her voice dropped. "Graham." Evan didn't nod. He didn't have to. "I'm not here to accuse," he said. "Just don't want to see someone smart get crushed by the same game that took me down." Sienna turned away, heart pounding. Graham had been her right hand for years, her confidant, the one who sold her on this merger as a ticket to global scale. She remembered telling him, "I'm not afraid of losing money, I'm afraid of losing control." And how he had laughed, "Then let me hold the wheel for a while." She turned back to Evan. "Go back to work. I'm not firing you. But you are not to leave the premises during your shift." Evan nodded, unbothered. "I wasn't planning on leaving," he replied. "Not yet. I know what kind of storm I just kicked up. You understand what you've started?" He looked her in the eye, voice steady. "If I stay silent again, I'll have nothing left to pass on to my daughter." That stopped her cold. She really saw him then, a man who had stood among financial giants, now pushing a mop, yet still unwilling to let go of the truth. A man with nothing left to lose but his own self-respect. And for the first time, Sienna felt something unfamiliar about him, a question. What if he was right? The lobby of Calvert Equities teemed with restrained urgency as the morning rush began. Sunlight fractured across glass walls, polished floors echoed with the rhythmic click of expensive shoes, and executives buried their heads in a blur of strategy decks and coffee. Amid them moved Evan Marlowe, unnoticed, steering a janitor's cart past the espresso station. The comforting scent of roasted beans washed over him, but today, he had no time for comforts. Folded neatly in his back pocket was a photocopy of the contract, a clause that could tear the company apart. A security guard nodded politely. "Busy morning, huh?" Evan offered a faint smile. "Aren't they all, when someone's selling your house while you sleep?" The guard laughed, half confused, as Evan pushed on without waiting for a reply. High above, in the company's inner sanctum, Sienna sat alone in the boardroom, her eyes fixed on a paused security video on her tablet. Evan was on the screen, placing the envelope down with calm precision, like a man delivering a truth no one wanted to hear. She replayed that footage 5 times, still refusing to speak of it to Graham, to legal, or even to her own assistant. Her fingers trembled as she replayed a voice note she recorded the night before. Clause 7.3 roots voting shares to a Cayman shell, but the board holds final say, right? Half rhetorical, half unsure. But now, Evan's warning made that uncertainty echo louder than ever. The conference room door opened. Graham Voss stepped in, impossibly put together in a tailored gray suit that seemed woven from practiced lies. "You called for me?" he asked with the same effortless charm that had once calmed her nerves. Sienna closed her tablet slowly. "Yes. I need to go over the ownership structure again after the merger." He chuckled, dismissive. "We reviewed that weeks ago, Sienna. You signed off on it?" Her eyes sharpened. "Remind me, who drafted clause 7.3? A flicker, barely a flicker, crossed his face. "Legal, probably with the finance subcommittee." "I want the original drafting records," she ordered. "I'll have them sent over," he replied, smoothly, but too smoothly. Sienna stood. Her voice was almost gentle, but the blade was in the calm. "Has anything changed since the Silvergate discussions?" Graham's smile faltered. "Changed how?" "In the sense," she continued, "that if I sign this deal, am I still running Calvert?" He laughed lightly, too lightly. "Of course. You're the face of this company, the founder. This merger only scales what you've built." She didn't break eye contact. Graham filled the silence with more sugar-coated nonsense, but the unease in her chest only grew. That night, Evan retreated to the janitor's closet, closing the metal door behind him like a confessional booth. From behind the bleach bottles and rags, he pulled a battered notepad. Old instincts. He scribbled quickly, Clause 7.3 equals split votes vos possible hidden trustee verify Cayman trust owner. A gentle knock broke the silence. Evan cracked open the door. There stood Maisie, backpack half unzipped, holding a cookie in one hand and a wrinkled stick figure drawing in the other. Break room was boring, she announced. Miss Darlene said I could come find you. He sighed, kneeling. You're supposed to stay with her, Maisie. These halls aren't for kids. Maisie held up the drawing a stick figure family, with one new person added, a woman in a suit, smiling wide but with serious eyes. Is that her? Evan asked. The lady from this morning, Maisie explained between cookie bites. She looked scared, even if she didn't say it. Evan blinked. Scared? She's the CEO, kiddo. She doesn't scare easy. Maisie tilted her head. Maybe not scared of people. Maybe scared of herself. Evan couldn't even laugh. Out of the mouths of children. Upstairs, Sienna sat in the dark, watching the city lights bloom across the skyline. She hadn't bothered to switch on a lamp. Shadows made thinking easier. Her mentor's words came back to her then, power isn't about keeping control. It's about knowing what you're willing to lose. That line made more sense to her now than ever. She whispered, to no one, what am I willing to lose? Down in the parking garage, Evan loaded Maisie into his beat-up sedan, tucking her in beneath a fraying blanket. Before starting the engine, he looked back at the towering building behind him. She might not listen, he said softly, mostly to himself. A small voice came from the back seat, muffled in the dark. You weren't trying to make her listen, Daddy. You were trying to tell the truth. Evan glanced in the rearview mirror, half a smile breaking through. That's the thing about the truth, kid. It doesn't always shout. But it always echoes. He turned the key, and the old engine rumbled to life just like the storm he'd set in motion. The following morning arrived cloaked in uneasy silence, the heavy sort that signals a breaking point. In the mirrored walls of an elevator, Sienna watched her own reflection, polished, controlled, powerful, but her eyes were tired, painfully alert. Floor numbers ticked by one after the other, until the doors slid open on the executive floor. She clutched her tablet like a shield. Meetings loomed, press calls, final sign-offs, risk reviews. But all she could think about was Clause 7.3 and the janitor who had dared to warn her. On the operations level, Evan was back in uniform, pushing his mop methodically across marble floors. If anyone noticed him at all, they saw only a man in overalls. But Sienna noticed. Hey, Marlo. A voice called. Doug from IT was carrying a cardboard tray stacked with coffee cups. Evan looked up. You dropped this, Doug said, handing him a folded piece of paper. Evan's notes, left near the loading dock. Didn't he read it? Doug added with a shrug, but looked important. Thanks, Evan muttered, stuffing it deep into his jacket. His hands didn't stop trembling for a long time afterward. Upstairs, Sienna entered the executive lounge for her 9:30 briefing and nearly tripped at the sight of a small girl perched by the window, drawing purple crayon shapes on scratch paper. The receptionist scurried up. Miss Calvert, I'm so sorry, Mr. Marlowe's daughter. Her school had a last-minute closure. He didn't want to leave her alone. He promised she'd stay out of the way. Sienna raised a hand to calm her. It's fine. The little girl looked up, smiling brightly. You're the CEO, right? Sienna gave a bemused nod. Maisie grinned. Daddy said you look like someone who doesn't believe in sleep or second chances. The receptionist gasped, horrified, but Sienna laughed a raw, genuine laugh she hadn't felt in weeks. Maisie lit up. See, you should laugh more. Your face gets prettier. Something in Sienna broke, then a hairline fracture in her polished mask. She crouched beside the girl. What are you drawing? Maisie showed her. A house. But a safe house. Sienna paused. Safe from what? Maisie studied her with a seriousness beyond her years. From people who smile while they lie. Sienna had no words. She stood, walked out, and felt that sentence coil through her like a warning. Back in her office, Sienna unlocked her personal files and began digging through the contract archives, searching for the digital fingerprints of Clause 7.3. She quickly realized something: the file history had been hidden, tagged under an old compliance memo and routed around the main servers, something only someone deeply familiar with the system could pull off. She picked up her phone. Legal: pull the metadata on any contract edits in the last 90 days. Quietly. Yes, Miss Calvert, the voice on the other end replied. She ended the call, then, almost unconsciously, opened her voice notes again. A recording played, her own voice from weeks ago. If this goes wrong, it's on me. I can't keep pretending I see everything, just because I'm too afraid to blink. Hearing it out loud made her flinch. And yet, there it was, truth, waiting for her to stop pretending. Later that day, Evan walked past the main printer room, a place he usually avoided when something caught his eye. A single page, half sticking out of the output tray, abandoned. On impulse, he reached for it. It was a draft memo from Graham Voss, subject, Transition Protocol, Post-Merger Voting Realignment. The language looked routine, but Evan's stomach dropped as he read between the lines. It was subtle corporate sleight of hand. The memo proposed shifting voting blocks to a holding trust in exchange for oversight coordination. In other words, a transfer of power, quietly orchestrated. Evan slipped the paper into his notebook. His pulse was hammering, but his focus felt clean for the first time in years. He went back to the maintenance closet, pulled up the company email on his phone, and typed, subject, the things we pretend not to see. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect trust. But I think you're starting to see it now. They buried it deep, but it's there. Look at the metadata tags. Look at who accessed the compliance shell. Don't blink. M. That night, Sienna read the message. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it, either. Instead, she sat alone in her office with the lights off, watching the city lights shimmer against the glass. One floor below, Heaven mopped the marble lobby floors, unaware he was passing beneath a war that had just been reignited. In a corner of that same lobby, Maisie sat cross-legged with her crayons, sketching 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, one tiny. In the corner, she wrote in wobbly block letters, "Truth is what makes a place safe." Elsewhere in the building, in separate rooms, 2 adults, each broken in different ways, felt something shift. Not certainty yet, but something near it. By sunset, Manhattan looked like a cathedral of steel and silence. Sienna Calvert stood by her office's floor-to-ceiling window, arms folded, shoulders braced. Something beneath her skin had begun to wake. A truth she had buried long ago was breathing again. Behind her, her tablet buzzed with legal updates, board notifications, curated news of the merger. She ignored them. In her hand was a printed copy of Evan's email, subject, "Don't blink." It wasn't the words that shook her. It was the tone. Calm. Resigned. The voice of a man who had already made peace with what honesty would cost. She picked up the phone. Get Evan Marlowe to the 42nd floor. Now. 10 minutes later, Evan stepped in, still in his janitor's uniform. The faint scent of bleach clung to his sleeves, but he carried himself differently, like a man finished with hiding. Sienna didn't stand. Take a seat, she instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Evan obeyed without hesitation. I read your email, she began. Then I had them pull the metadata logs, just like you said. She slid a thin folder across the desk. Graham's name appears 3 times. Once on the compliance archive. Once when the clause was renamed. And once, last week, with edit permissions. Evan glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. You already suspected, didn't you? She asked. I didn't know, he admitted. But I've learned to recognize rot, even when it's hidden under gold leaf. Sienna pressed her fingertips against her temple. I built this company from nothing, she whispered. Every deal, every partnership, from sheer fear that if I didn't stay 10 steps ahead, someone would steal it. And now the threat's not outside, Evan said gently, it's standing next to you. Her shoulders sagged. I have to stop this, she breathed, but I can't move unless I have solid ground. The board already thinks I'm paranoid. Evan leaned forward. Then let me help you. Silence pooled between them. You want to trade your mop for a badge and a laptop? She asked. Evan offered a dry smile. I'd rather clean up numbers than coffee stains. She studied him. I can authorize a quiet consultancy role, she said carefully. Access to what you need, but if this leaks, if Graham catches wind, we both go down. Evan nodded once. I've been down before, he said. This time I'll bring a flashlight. She nearly smiled. Almost. That night, Evan sat at his small kitchen table, the glow of an old laptop casting shadows around him. Maisie was asleep in the next room, her tiny socks scattered across the hall like breadcrumbs. He moved fast, combing through archived financials, merger statements, subsidiary ledgers. His phone buzzed, unknown number, they'll come for you next. He read it, unfazed, and deleted it. Truth had always been dangerous. But silence was fatal. The next morning, Sienna walked into the boardroom to meet the legal committee. Graham was already there, black coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up with casual swagger. He stood as she entered. You look rested, he said. Looks can lie, she replied. Their eyes locked, an invisible knife drawn between them. I've decided to bring in an independent consultant, Sienna said evenly. Quiet audit. Just a sanity check before final signatures. Graham's smile twitched. Paranoia doesn't suit you. Neither does betrayal, she countered, then took her seat. That afternoon, Evan, dressed in simple slacks and a button-down, logged into Calvert's digital vault. As he typed in the secure password, he whispered, "Let us see what ghosts still live in this machine." He scrolled through spreadsheets, redacted memos, approval chains until he found it, a single Excel file from 6 months ago, hidden under deferred liabilities. The contents spelled it out, a transfer of equity rights to a Cayman Islands shell, precisely timed with the merger. Trustee Graham Voss. That night, Maisie crawled into Evan's lap with her bedtime book. Are you working for the nice lady now? She asked, big eyes serious. Evan smoothed her hair. Just for a while. Is she going to be okay? He hesitated. She's smart. But even smart people get trapped when they trust the wrong hands. Maisie put her head on his chest. Then maybe she needs someone who tells the truth. Even if it hurts. Evan hugged her tighter. She does, he said. We all do. In that city of bright lights and quiet betrayals, two people worked from separate corners, one gathering evidence, the other gathering courage. They didn't know the storm about to break wide open, but they both knew this: truth doesn't whisper forever. Sooner or later, it knocks. The elevator descended. Evan felt a new weight, heavier than gravity, in the satchel at his side. A printed copy of the Cayman Trust documents. Proof undeniable, lethal, terrifying of Graham's silent power grab. The numbers. The offshore codes. The trustee's signature. It was all there. And yet, holding it, Evan didn't feel triumphant. He felt targeted. Because once you hold the truth, you become its next victim. Upstairs, Sienna stood alone in her private washroom, staring at her reflection. She had always believed strength meant never flinching. But tonight, the lines around her eyes told another story. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. Incoming call, Graham Voss. She let it ring. Right now, she didn't need more words. She needed facts, and Evan was bringing them. 20 minutes later, in her locked office, Evan placed the papers on her desk. Sienna read through them, page by page, without a flicker of shock. Her stillness was louder than any gasp. Why the Cayman Islands, she asked, more to herself. Because sunlight doesn't reach there, Evan answered. Not the kind that matters. Did you make copies? Yes, but only to a flash drive. I didn't email it. I know how this works. She nodded. Why are you helping me, she asked at last. He met her eyes. Because I've seen what happens when no one does. She paused, then spoke in a voice almost too small to hear. There's something cruel about betrayal. It never comes from your enemies. Between them, a heavy silence, honest and raw. Evan finally saw past the CEO, to a woman who had survived by building walls so high no one could climb them. Later, in the bustling cafeteria, Graham sipped espresso, eyes scanning the floor like a predator. His phone buzzed, no name. One line, she knows. He didn't flinch. He set the cup down, adjusted his cufflinks, and pivoted. That evening, the offices emptied. Sienna reviewed grainy security footage from 6 months ago, Graham, after hours, entering the finance room, plugging in a USB, overwriting folder permissions. He hadn't even tried to hide it. He thought I'd never looked this far back, she whispered. The intercom crackled. Ms. Calvert, Mr. Voss is here. Says it's urgent. Sienna narrowed her eyes. Send him in. Graham strode in like he owned the air itself. Sienna, he said smoothly. I wanted to check in before tomorrow's press round. She motioned to the chair. Have a seat. He didn't. He stood by the window, surveying the skyline like it was his. You've been distant, he said. Like you're preparing for a fight that doesn't exist. She said nothing. He turned. You know partnerships are built on trust. She met his gaze. And saw it the briefest flicker, the mask slipping. What exactly are you accusing me of, he asked, voice hard now. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder, copies, not the originals, and slid them across. Graham barely glanced down. You've been busy, he said. She leaned forward. I know everything. The shell company. The trustee. The metadata. I even have you on video, Graham. His jaw clenched. You think this wins you something? She stood. It wins me my company back. Graham laughed the cruel kind, meant to break people. You think the board will side with the janitor over me? He's not a janitor, she said. He's the man who refused to look away. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't want to start a war, Sienna. You want to survive it? I've survived worse, she answered. And this time, I'm not alone. They stared each other down. Finally, Graham turned and walked out without another word. Downstairs, Evan waited with Maisie, who was finishing a juice box. You're quiet, she said. Just thinking, he replied. She leaned against him. Did she believe you? He smiled faintly. I think she believed herself. That's harder, right? Much harder, he said. As Manhattan's lights burned into the night, two battles waited to be fought, one in a boardroom of polished knives, and one in two people's hearts who had finally decided not to run. Out of what he framed as concern for the company's fiduciary duty, Graham Voss cleared his throat, projecting calm, and addressed the board. Out of respect for our obligations, he began smoothly, I move that we initiate a temporary vote of no confidence in Miss Calvert's leadership, pending an internal investigation. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Then came the rustle of papers, hushed murmurs, darting glances between board members. Ranada Doyle, the chairwoman, cleared her throat. Miss Calvert, she said, steady and formal, do you have a response? Sienna stood slowly, not flinching, not raising her voice. Calm as a blade. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small flash drive, and slotted it into the conference screen port. The projector hummed to life, dimming the room's lights. One file appeared on screen, Cayman Transfer Trustee Approval.pdf. Another, security camera footage, time-stamped, showing Graham late at night, USB drive in hand. A cold silence fell. Sienna's voice broke it with a quiet power that cut straight through. What Mr. Voss calls paranoia, she said, I call vigilance. She turned to face the board. Clause 7.3 was not an innocent error, she continued, her voice unwavering. It was planted. Planted so that, once this merger closed, controlling interest in Calvert Equities would shift to an offshore trust. A trust controlled by Graham Voss. Gasps escaped the table. A few board members sat back, stunned. Sienna pressed play. The audit trail came alive on the screen, scrolling, access logs, email headers, permission changes all pointing back to Graham. Graham tried to interrupt, voice shaking, but Ranada cut him off sharply. Sit down, she ordered. Graham flinched, veneer cracking, but obeyed. Sienna stepped closer. I didn't want to believe it at first, she admitted. I thought maybe I'd been in this tower too long, too isolated, too blind. But then someone with nothing to gain and everything to lose showed me the truth. She locked eyes with each board member, steady, fierce. And now I'm showing it to you. The vote followed almost instantly. 9 votes to 3. Graham Voss, suspended, effective immediately. Legal would sort out the details, but the damage wasn't just on paper, it hung in the air, a betrayal that burned even as the room slowly emptied. Long after everyone had gone, Sienna stayed in the boardroom alone, staring at the now dark projector screen, her thoughts circling like crows. That evening, Evan waited outside the building with Maisie's small hand wrapped around his finger. Sienna stepped through the glass doors, coat over her arm, as the storm clouds finally split open overhead, rain beginning to fall. "You were right," she said quietly, stopping next to him. "They never saw it coming." Evan nodded, as if to say he hadn't either. Sienna looked down at Maisie, who was scribbling something in a tiny notebook with a red crayon. "What are you drawing now?" she asked. Maisie didn't look up. "A shield," she answered. "For people who get hurt doing the right thing." Sienna blinked, then crouched to her level. "That's a very important drawing," she said. Maisie nodded solemnly. "My dad says sometimes people like you forget you're allowed to be scared." Sienna swallowed, moved, as Evan gently put a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "And sometimes," he added softly, "people like me forget what it feels like to be seen." The three of them stood quietly, rain spattering the sidewalk around them, until Sienna straightened and looked at Evan with resolve. "I want to make your role permanent," she said. "Not as a janitor. As a strategic analyst. Quietly off the books, but with full access. You saw something the rest of us missed. That matters." Evan exhaled, cautious. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I don't exactly blend in." Sienna gave a tired but genuine smile. "Maybe I'm done hiring people who vanish when things get hard." He nodded, the decision made. That night, in the quiet of his apartment, Evan tucked Maisie into bed and watched her fall asleep. On the nightstand, she left her crayon shield, a crooked drawing that looked more like a heart wrapped in armor. He stared at it for a long moment, then walked to his laptop and began building a new firewall, not of code or policy, but of truth. Because this time, he wasn't cleaning up after anyone. He was protecting what mattered. And across Calvert Equities, from the penthouse to the sub-basement, something had shifted. The janitor had spoken and the company had listened. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the executive floor windows, but the air felt sharp and cold. Evan Marlowe sat in a small corner office marked Temporary Consultant, Strategic Risk. His old mop cart was gone, replaced by a sleek desk, dual monitors, and a security badge with his name spelled correctly at last. He didn't look comfortable. He looked alert. Because something about the way Graham had walked out still gnawed at him, the faint smirk, the unbroken poise. That hadn't been defeat. That had been a delay. Across the floor, Sienna stepped into her office and froze. On her desk sat a black envelope. No return address. No handwriting. Her gut tightened. She opened it. Inside, a USB drive. And a folded note, typed in cold, emotionless lines. "You think you've won? Let's ask the world what they think of your new janitor." No signature. No direct threat. But the meaning was crystal clear. Evan was still cross-referencing offshore account closures when his phone buzzed. "Sienna, can you come to my office 2 minutes later?" He stood across from her, reading the note she handed him. His jaw tightened as he recognized the model of the USB, the same brand Graham had used to slip in the original transfer clause. "You think it's just a bluff?" Sienna asked. Evan shook his head grimly. "No, I think he's about to play his dirtiest card." He plugged the drive into his personal, offline laptop and waited. A video file popped up instantly. Grainy, shaky. Shot from a hidden angle in the break room. Evan and Sienna talking, laughing. Then another clip tighter, in her office, heads close over documents. It froze on a frame where Sienna's hand briefly touched Evan's wrist. Taken out of context, it looked intimate. Too intimate. Sienna sat back in her chair, ice in her voice. "He's going to spin this," she spat, "as a scandal. Abuse of power," Evan added. "That you hired someone you were involved with." "There's nothing between us," she snapped. Evan looked away, jaw tense. "He knows that," he said. "But he also knows how fast a rumor can travel, especially when the truth's only walking." Within hours, an anonymous tip leaked to business blogs: CEO caught in secret relationship with janitor turned consultant. Sienna's phone nearly vibrated off her desk. Press queries. Legal messages. Even a text from a board member: "Do you need to step away temporarily, for optics?" She threw the phone onto the couch. Evan stood in the doorway. "We knew he'd hit back," he said evenly. "I thought he'd go after me," Sienna said bitterly. "Not you." Evan stepped closer. "He's not going after me," he said. "He's attacking trust." Her expression softened, exhaustion and rage mixing in her eyes. "This company has been my entire identity for 20 years, she whispered. "Every success, every mistake. Written into these walls." Evan nodded. "Then let us remind them what the truth sounds like." She raised a brow. "And what would that be?" Evan's voice was quiet, but heavy as an anvil. "It sounds like a woman who didn't flinch when power tried to rewrite her name. And a man who wouldn't stay silent, even when the world told him to mop floors and keep his head down." Sienna closed her eyes, letting the words steady her. When she opened them, they burned with determination. The next morning, she called a surprise press conference. No permission from the board, no spin. Just the raw, unfiltered truth. She stepped up to the podium, framed by the Calvert Equity seal and a forest of microphones. "I want to address the recent rumors," she began, her voice steel steady. "Yes, I brought on a consultant with an unconventional background. Yes, he previously worked in our janitorial department. No, I do not have a personal relationship with him." She paused, letting the room breathe. "But here's what I do have," she continued, raising the original documents in one hand: the shell company papers, the Cayman transfer approvals, the falsified clause trail. Proof that my second-in-command tried to steal this company through backdoor deals and corporate sabotage. That is what my consultant uncovered. That is why he deserves respect, not suspicion." A reporter raised her hand. "Why not just handle this privately?" Sienna's eyes met the cameras, unblinking. "Because truth handled quietly often dies quietly," she said. "And this truth deserves to live." After the press conference, the office buzzed with a new kind of energy. Some whispered, some nodded, and some, for the first time, looked Evan in the eye, not with pity or suspicion but with respect. In the lobby, Maisie ran up to him, her small backpack bouncing, a folded note clutched in her hand. "What's this?" Evan asked. "I made you a certificate," she beamed. "For doing the scariest job in the world." He unfolded it. Bright blue crayon letters spelled out, "Truth Teller of the Year for being braver than grown-ups." He knelt and hugged her tight. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he whispered. Maisie grinned. "You stopped lying to yourself." Upstairs, Sienna watched them through the glass. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something shift in her own chest, something warmer than relief, closer to hope. Because this time, she hadn't won by outmaneuvering a crisis, she had faced it. And thanks to the man who once mopped her floors, she had reminded the entire company that truth doesn't have to come wrapped in an expensive suit or Ivy League credentials. Sometimes it comes with a mop and a flashlight. And sometimes, it changes everything. The old iron gate creaked as Sienna stepped onto a neglected property tucked at the far end of Terrytown. Ivy had begun to swallow the stone walls of what had once been a prestigious law office handling Calvert's dirtiest secrets. Evan waited by the curb, watching Maisie color in the back seat of his truck. "You sure she'll talk to you?" he asked. Sienna squared her shoulders. "I'm not," she admitted. "But if she won then Graham wins." Before her fist reached the brass knocker, the door opened. A tall woman in her 50s stood there, silver hair tied back, sharp blue eyes honed by decades of reading between the lines. Margot Levins, Calvert's former general counsel, the one who vanished 2 years ago under a health-related retirement. Sienna met her gaze. 15 minutes, she said simply. Margot studied her, suspicion deep as old scars, then stepped aside. Inside, the place smelled of old law books and dried lavender. They sat across from each other in 2 faded armchairs, survivors of 1,000 settlements. "I thought I'd seen the last of Calvert when I left with my spine intact," Margot said flatly. "Why now?" Sienna took a deep breath, then placed the flash drive on the table. "It's happening again," she said. "Only this time, the parasite has a familiar face." Margot's expression didn't move. "Graham forged my signature," Sienna explained. "He buried a clause that hands control of the company to an offshore entity he owns. And now he's framing the whistleblower who exposed him, a man who used to clean our floors." Still, Margot said nothing. "He used your retirement clause," Sienna added softly, "to erase the audit trail. The same tool you created." That hit home. Margot's fingers twitched against her teacup. "I warned them," she murmured. "I told the board we were building a castle with no doors, only mirrors." Sienna leaned forward, voice steady. "I'm not asking you to come back. I just need your word to confirm the audit trail was tampered using your old legal framework." Margot stared into her tea for a long, heavy pause. "You don't need my word," she finally said. "You need a reckoning." She rose, crossed to an old file cabinet, and retrieved a locked folder, sealed and stamped. Inside were handwritten notes, internal memos, and a resignation letter, one drafted for her, by Graham, months before she ever left. "He threatened to destroy my name if I didn't disappear quietly," Margot admitted. "So I left. But I've regretted it every day since." Sienna's voice broke, just a crack. "You kept all this?" Margot gave a half smile, tired but defiant. "A lawyer never throws away the truth. We just wait until the world wants it again." Back at the office, Evan pored over the folder page by page, as if rebuilding a crime scene. "This," he whispered, "this is everything. Buried memos, original templates, even the email Graham had sent a junior staffer to make Calvert leaner at the top, code for pushing Margot out." Sienna stood at the window, eyes distant. "Tomorrow," she said, "the annual shareholders' assembly goes live. The investors all believe Graham is their golden boy." Evan smiled faintly. "Then we show them gold," he said. "Because truth shines brightest when it's been buried." She turned to him, haunted. "But they'll come for me. The press. The board. The markets. They'll call me the woman who let a janitor infiltrate the C-suite." Evan met her eyes, Steady. Let them talk, he said. You didn't let me in. You listened. Sienna exhaled, voice smaller. And if we fail? Evan smiled, a quiet warrior-esque grin. Then we failed for something that mattered. A deep, raw silence settled between them, charged with hard-won respect. Just then, a knock on the door. Maisie poked her head in. Dad, can we go get tacos? My brain's tired from grown-up talking. Evan laughed. 2 minutes, kiddo. Maisie turned to Sienna. You should come, too. Grown ups need tacos when they're sad. Sienna blinked, then let out a surprised smile. You know what, Maisie, that might be the smartest thing I've heard all day. That night, in the warm booth of a local taco joint, the three of them sat together. Not as CEO and janitor. Not as whistleblower and executive. But simply as people, learning what trust can feel like when no one is asked to earn it. Maisie took a big bite of her taco, then paused. You know, she said, matter of fact, when someone's lying, their eyes blink too fast. That's how I knew Mr. Graham was a fake. Evan laughed out loud. Is that right? Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep believing in the quiet power of truth. The screen faded to black. Somewhere across the world, a teenager in Jakarta paused the video and wiped tears from his eyes, sharing it instantly with a friend. In Sao Paulo, a mother nodded in silent recognition, thinking of the janitor at her son's school who always had a kind word. In Toronto, a retired accountant smiled, remembering a time he had spoken up when no one else would. The story rippled outward, like a pebble dropped in a still lake. Meanwhile, at Calvert Equities, the next chapter was beginning. It had been 3 weeks since Graham Voss was escorted from the shareholder meeting, his empire of manipulation turned to dust in the span of a single morning. Headlines still debated whether he might mount a counterattack or slip away to some safe haven offshore, but Sienna didn't let herself waste time worrying. She had a company to rebuild, not just on spreadsheets, but in spirit. Her first act was to officially appoint a new ethics oversight team, with Margot Levins leading the charge. Margot walked back through the marble lobby like a storm in calm seas, steel in her spine, but an open hand for those who needed to come forward. She called it the Reckoning Committee, and she meant every syllable. Evan, meanwhile, had taken a consulting retainer only on a flexible basis, insisting he wouldn't become another polished fixture of the tower. He split his hours between helping to modernize Calvert's cybersecurity protocols and volunteering at the local youth coding program with Maisie on weekends. He was surprised by how naturally that felt, no longer mopping up someone else's mess, but teaching kids how to protect their own digital footprints. Maisie liked to call it superhero school for nerds. One Friday afternoon, Evan arrived at the Calvert building with a faded canvas backpack, Maisie skipping beside him, still wearing her yellow raincoat even though the sun was high and warm. Sienna was in the lobby waiting, coffee in one hand, a file folder in the other. Busy, she asked, a playful note in her voice. Always, Evan said with a half grin, and then he nodded toward Maisie. But someone insisted we stop by. Apparently there's a CEO who still hasn't learned how to work a proper firewall. Sienna laughed, light and unguarded in a way that had once seemed impossible. Guilty, she admitted. Maisie stepped forward, dramatically straightening her little backpack. Today's lesson is about being safe online, she announced. But also about remembering to say thank you when someone saves your butt. Sienna knelt, eye to eye with the girl. Then thank you, Captain Maisie. For saving my butt. Maisie giggled and ran off to explore the big lobby fountain, leaving Sienna and Evan in a moment of quiet. "Do you ever wonder," she began, "if all this will last, if the board will stand with me, if the culture really changes?" Evan didn't answer right away. He watched Maisie spin in the sunbeam that cut through the lobby glass. Then he turned to Sienna, steady. "I don't know," he said. "I think maybe nothing ever really lasts. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. Doesn't mean you stop showing up." She nodded. There were still moments, late at night, when she doubted herself, doubted whether letting the world see her break had been the right move. But then she remembered the faces in the shareholder hall, the raw collective breath of people realizing that truth could still win, even in a cutthroat world. That was worth every lost night's sleep. They headed upstairs together. The office had shifted. People greeted Evan now with respect instead of polite dismissal. The security guard gave him a fist bump, the cafeteria lady asked after Maisie. He didn't feel invisible anymore, and maybe that was the most radical change of all. Sienna watched as Evan plugged in a new encryption key to the executive system. "I don't know how you trust anyone after what happened," she murmured. He smiled faintly, never looking up. "You don't trust people," he said. "You trust your ability to stand up again if they let you down." That landed heavy, and true. Sienna took a deep breath and turned to the window, the skyline a perfect sprawl of future and history. Below, Maisie was showing Margot how to fold a paper crane. Margot, once a terrifying legend in corporate law, had her sleeves rolled up and was actually listening to a child. "Do you think she'll ever want to come work here?" Sienna asked, pointing down to Maisie. Evan snorted. "She's going to own the place one day. You watch." They shared a laugh. Later that evening, Evan and Maisie found themselves in the same little taco joint as before. A local guitarist strummed by the window, the cheap string lights overhead giving everything a soft glow. Sienna arrived late, a hint of flour on her blouse. "Baking therapy?" Evan teased. She shrugged. "Blueberry muffins. I wanted to feel like a person again." He raised his cup of horchata. "To being a person." They clinked glasses. Maisie looked up from her plate of chips, frowning. "You two talk like grown-ups too much," she said, then pointed to Evan. "You never did the thing." "What thing?" "The thing," she insisted, eyes wide. He blinked. "You never told Miss Sienna what you were gonna do with your next chance." Evan went still. "So did Sienna." "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been asking myself that." Maisie crossed her arms. "You better figure it out. Second chances don't wait forever." Sienna laughed, then grew serious. "She's right," she said softly. "If you could do anything, no titles, no board, no anything, what would you do?" Evan leaned back. He thought of dirty mop water, of a daughter who deserved better, of a city that chewed people up. "I think," he said finally, "I'd teach. Not just code. Life. Truth. How to see the real thing when everything else is lying to you." Sienna nodded. "Then do that." And for the first time in years, he let himself believe he could. A week later, Calvert Equity hosted a community open house, an unheard of event, the building's glass walls flung wide to invite people in rather than keep them out. Evan led a workshop on digital safety for neighborhood teens. Margot explained to young women how to stand their ground in corporate rooms that didn't want them. Sienna walked a group of small kids through the boardroom and showed them where decisions were made, letting them sit in the chairs, letting them dream. When it was over, Maisie tugged Sienna's sleeve. "Did you ever want to be something else?" she asked. Sienna smiled, remembering a childhood drawing somewhere long lost a picture of a lighthouse, guiding ships home. "Yeah," she said. "I wanted to help people not get lost." Maisie beamed. "That's a good job." And maybe, Sienna thought, she was finally doing exactly that. On a rainy Thursday, Evan stood at the window of his small apartment. Maisie was asleep on the couch, a coloring book fallen across her chest. His laptop was open. The cursor blinked on a blank page, waiting. He typed, slowly at first, then more steadily. "Why tell the truth?" He paused. Then wrote, "Because if you don't, someone will build a lie on your silence. Because even if it costs you everything, at least you will still have yourself." He closed the file, saved it under a name that made him grin, Maisie's dad. The next chapter. At Calvert, a new plaque was quietly mounted in the lobby. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting. It read, "Dedicated to those who sweep the dust away, so we can see what was always worth saving." Evan saw it one morning and just stood there, reading it over and over. He didn't know who had ordered it. Maybe Sienna, maybe Margot, maybe 100 voices that had learned to believe in their own courage again. But he felt seen. In the warm days that followed, they settled into something close to ordinary. Maisie started piano lessons, the teacher marveling at her ear for music. Evan built a small website for his classes, hoping to grow it someday into a school. Sienna worked fewer late nights. She'd begun reading novels again, halfway through one with a heroine who refused to stay silent. Sometimes, on slow Sunday afternoons, they'd all meet at the park. Sienna would bring muffins, Evan would bring a soccer ball, and Maisie would bring her endless questions about the world. And for a moment, a real, honest moment, there was no war to fight, no corporate betrayal to uncover, no power to defend. There was just life. One evening, after the sun had set, Evan and Sienna stood together watching Maisie chase fireflies in the tall summer grass. Sienna glanced sideways. "Do you regret it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Staying," she clarified. "Choosing to fight with me." He took a breath. "No," he said. "I only regret how long it took me to believe my voice mattered." She nodded. "Me too," she whispered. And in that quiet, they found peace, the kind that grows, not from winning, but from surviving with your soul intact. If you're still here, dear listener, dear viewer, dear witness to this story, thank you. Thank you for believing that a janitor can change the course of a billion-dollar empire. Thank you for believing that a child can be braver than grown ups. Thank you for believing that power can learn to bend, that walls can come down, and that windows can open again. And wherever you are, whether it's Lahore, London, Manila, Miami, please remember, your truth matters. Speak it. Defend it. Live it.